We've probably all found ourselves missing an ingredient for our next brew day. Let's say you were planning to brew a Scottish export using Caramel 60, but oops, you don't have any. Well, could you instead create a blend, half of which came from Caramel 40 and the other half from Caramel 80, and get the same result? Well, to find out, Brülosophy contributor Will Lovell is here, describing an experiment testing exactly this. Could blinded participants and Will himself distinguish between the beers? Well, let's find out. This episode is sponsored by Great Fermentations. More on them in a bit.
Hi, my name is Will Lovell, and I'm with Brülosophy.
Now, the variable that you're testing here, I kind of love this because it seems to make sense at the highest possible level of scientific investigation, which is to say, if you take a grain and you don't have it, if you take a little bit of a grain that's darker and one that's lighter and then you combine them, should be more or less the same, right? So that's basically what you did here with these caramel malts.
Well, and it makes total sense because even with like crystal malts, because the way they make crystal malt in the UK is a little different than how Briess makes their caramel malts. And so Briess has a little bit more consistency and color, but I believe because of the roasting process that they use, the kilning process in the UK, where they have kind of the barrel roasters, I believe they get kind of more of a gradient. And so usually when you get a crystal malt, it's kind of like the average of that gradient for the color, whereas, Briess is a bit more precise. And so it would stand to reason, if you believe that crystal malt is indeed different than caramel malt, that part of that reason would be not just country of origin and how it's made, but also like the kind of the gradient that you get across these varying levels of roasting.
With that in mind, then, can we create a hybrid crystal 60 by combining equal amounts of crystal 40 and 80?
Either that, or maybe if you combine the C40 and the C80, are the sum greater than their parts?
Indeed. So to do this, then, you put together this recipe. Tell me about the grain bill here.
To me, this is a pretty straightforward grain bill. It was about 8.5 pounds of Thomas Fawcett Maris Otter, which made up about 84% of the grist. I had either 1.5 pounds of Caramel 60 malt from Briess, or I had 12 ounces of Caramel 40 and 12 ounces of Caramel 80 from Briess. And then we also had about 2 ounces of roasted barley, just to give it a little bit of color, which is the tradition with Scottish export.
So let's talk about your actual brew day process. Now, last time we talked about an experiment, we were saying how the variable came right up front, right in the grain mill itself, and that was the case here as well.
Not to be repetitive or redundant or want to do too many grain experiments, because I think this is the third one I've done in a pretty short amount of time. But I find these very intriguing, and I do love the simplicity of just kind of, you weigh it all out, you make sure it's labeled, and as long as you keep your labeling straight at the end of the day, by the end of the brew process, your variable's already introduced and done. So it's pretty fantastic to kind of get that out of the way in the beginning. That way it's out of sight, out of mind.
So you got the grains milled, and then you put them into two separate vessels. Tell me about the mash process.
So pretty standard, 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 60 minutes. And then, again, while that's mashing, I'm usually over there measuring out my hops, which wasn't that difficult this time. It was a nice big chunk of 18 grams of Northern Brew at 60 minutes. Very, very complex for this malt-forward style. So I prepared my hops during the mash. And once the mash was done, I did a no sparge, and so I just kind of pulled the basket up on my Delta all-in-one and then let it drain. And while it's draining, I kind of jack it up to boiling temp, and while it's coming to a boil, which on a 110 system takes about 45 minutes. So for me, I'm over there diligently putting together the tri-clamps for all my Delta firm tanks, because that takes a little bit more process now than it used to when it was just a solid keg. So you got to put all that together, and then once that comes to a boil, I added my 60-minute hop addition, then set back, cracked a beer, watched some TV, and waited for things to go ding.
And they went ding, and at that point you would have chilled down the wort and moved it into your two fermenters. Did you use your glycol system to help with the chilling?
Yes. So this is another instance where that Delta firm tank. So I have a nice kind of jaded, immersion chiller that cools it down to about 80, 90 degrees, something that I can get down pretty quick, and then I just move it on over to the fermenters, let the glycol get it down to yeast pitching temp. And then I pitched a pouch of Imperial Yeast A31 Tartan, which this is my first time getting to use that yeast. And but I hear that it is what you need to use if you're going to be making something that is Scottish.
Absolutely. Okay, so then you let it ferment 68 Fahrenheit, 20 Celsius for couple of weeks?
Yep, I believe it. This one was actually a pretty quick fermenter, honestly. And then after about a week, it already kind of reached what I consider to be terminal gravity. And so then I cold crashed it for 24 hours, came back the next day, and then did a transfer from my Delta firm tanks into my CO2 purge kegs, which is pretty simple the way those firm tanks are set up. And then burst carbonated overnight, gave it about a week or two, and then it was ready to serve to tasters.
Now, before we get to the results, a quick word on today's sponsor, Great Fermentations. Family owned and operated for more than 25 years, Great Fermentations offers a huge range of brewing supplies and equipment. Great Fermentations are well known for their top-notch customer service, which I can fully attest to. Great Fermentations offer the ability to custom build your malt bills in fractional amounts, so you're not forced to order full pound increments when you only need a half or a quarter pound of something. And shipping is free on most orders over $59. Check them out at greatfermentations.com. I think with a beer like this, the appearance is very interesting. So did the science work out? I mean, technically, these should have come out as pretty much exactly the same color if you average out the leather bond, but how did they actually appear side by side?
So if you look at them side by side, they actually, these pictures that I have, it's a nice cap of foam on top. Beautiful cap of foam, and then they look pretty much the same color, which is what you would kind of expect by kind of going with the averages here. So very excited that at least, with my eyes, they look identical to me.
So now it was time for the triangle test, and we started with yourself.
So here we're tasting my Scottish export. Basically, the variable is that in one of these cups, both C80 and C40 were used. That's the one with the X on it. On the other one, just C60 was used. And so there's, here you notice we have 4 cups. There's an X on 2 of them. I don't remember which one after I set them down. I kind of do this little ring around the rosy. Who knows what's going to happen? Can you keep your eye on the cup? I don't even remember what I did anymore. And so now I set the odd cup out. And it's my job to kind of go through here and taste these. So I think this one maybe smells a little brighter. Maybe this one, perhaps this one. I think I'm smelling maybe a slight raisiny, like more of a dark fruit kind of nose. So we'll see how that goes. I'm going to say that this is the odd beer out. And I'm wrong. Don't know that you can see that, but I'm wrong. So off we go. Here we go again. And so now I don't know which one is the odd cup out this time, so we'll see how it goes. Okay. Same. Nope. Wrong again. Always wrong. Who can tell? All right, let's keep going. We hate ourselves. All right. Make Martin feel better about himself by getting all these wrong, I guess. These are the same. Ah, they are, finally. The same ones. Yay. I'm going to say these are the same. Okay, they're the same. So it means I've gotten... what's that? 2 out of 4 right. So that's horrible, but it's okay. It's the same. Nope, wrong. So go one more time just for fun. These are the same. So I guess what does that make that? 3 out of 6. So it's about 50%. Probably not significant though.
Yes, I went in and did the triangle test, and as you know, Martin, when you're the brewer, you always want to be right because you know the variable. You were there from beginning to end, and it kind of came in, and both these beers, I did 3 out of 6. So to me, not quite enough to get it over that significant variable for me, but they were both nice, toasty, caramel, toffee notes. They were both pretty delicious beers, in all honesty.
A total of 20 participants took the test, receiving 1 sample of the Caramel 60 beer and 2 samples of the Caramel 4080 blend. In order to reach statistical significance, 11 tasters would have had to identify the odd beer out, and a total of 15 were able to do so, indicating they could reliably distinguish the beers. Now, while still blinded to the variable, participants were then asked to provide a preference. Of the 15 correct tasters, 4 preferred the blend, 7 preferred the C60, and 4 had either no preference or felt there was no perceptible difference. What do you make of that, Will?
So, the fact that I got it wrong, maybe I was a little bit surprised, but sometimes I serve these to people other than myself, and you do when you're doing these triangle tests back to back to back, kind of get a little bit of fatigue in there. And so, and maybe they just have better palates than me. That's very possible. So, but I guess again, if you're a proponent of crystal malt, you're kind of hoping for this because again, that gradient over the entire range kind of adds a little bit of complexity. And apparently that's what our tasters decided as well.
Based on this finding that we can't necessarily just take an averaging of existing ingredients and go with it and expect to get the exact same beer, will this change how you put together future recipes?
So seeing as how I could not tell them apart, if I'm brewing beer for me, I'm probably not going to worry about it too much. I tend to keep kind of that medium C malt on hand, kind of that C60 on hand. And so is it worth keeping more C80 and C40 around? Maybe not necessarily. Maybe I have kind of a light crystal and then jump all the way up to C60 and then maybe have a darker crystal, on hand as well. Or darker C malt on hand as well. But maybe it's not worth having all this blend together if I can't tell the difference. Now, I do know it's significant, but when I'm making my beer, my perception matters more to me than anybody else's. So that's the goal here.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is also nice to see confirmed that the grain bill that you put together can have a notable impact on the beer, even when it really wasn't a huge amount in terms of percentages of the overall recipe.
Well, you hear it said over and over again that grain is kind of the bass player of the band, so to speak. And I'm here to tell you, if you go to a country music night and you got a bunch of people two-stepping on the dance floor, if the bass player stops, most people don't know where to put their feet. So obviously grain choices and even small grain choices can be very important and very significant in brewing.